let's get started today with worksheet 2D. It's going to be very similar to what we worked on last week, where we are working and trying to figure out our total earnings. So we will do some of this together. You'll do some on your own, and we'll come back together as well. So notice at the top of the page, this is the $9.50 per hour problem, which means that our new rate is $9.50 per hour. Okay? So the first table is asking us to determine our total earnings for each week for 4 weeks. So below the table is an area for work. Let's do the first one together. So how would I determine the total earnings for week 1? What would I do? Who wants to tell us?
Multiply.
Multiply, exactly. I think that was you, Max, right? What would we multiply?
Oh, you multiply the hour and the how much you earn per hour.
Very good. So we multiply the amount of hours with how many hours we are working. So we're going to do 40 hours times $9.50 per hour. Okay? And we can do that calculation out. And it's okay to use calculators, or you can do the long way. Did anyone get an answer?
$380.
Very good. 380. So that's what goes into my first box of the chart. Why doesn't everybody take a moment to figure out your earnings for week 2, week 3, and week 4? Make sure you are showing out your work below, and then go ahead and fill them into the chart. Okay, so go ahead. All right, let's check our answers and see how we did. So for week 2, we have 4 hours and $9.50 per hour. Make sure you're staying with us right now on this to make sure that your answers are correct, because if they're not correct, then it's going to throw off your work on the next page. So 4 times $9.50 gives me $38. Let me fill that into the chart. For week 3, 8 hours. So we do 8 hours times $9.50. And that gives me $76. How are we doing so far? You getting the same answers? Yeah, good. And week 4, we have 20 hours times the $9.50 per hour. And that gives us $190. Please make sure you have these numbers correctly written, because like I said, on to the next page, you're going to need to make sure they're accurate. Any questions with number 1? Okay, let's slide down to number 2. Use a complete sentence to explain how you found your earnings. So, is there anybody who feels confident giving us a sentence where you're not using numbers? So what did we do for each of these problems? What did we do? What operation did we do? Someone tell us with that.
Multiply.
Multiplied, exactly. Now, someone besides Max, because he already filled us in kind of on this answer earlier. What are we multiplying each time? Bingo. Okay, Tim said it in class. We are multiplying the amount of money earned per hour by the total hours worked. Remember, that's not the only way that you can say that, right? We could say we multiplied the hourly wage by the number of hours worked. There's lots of different ways to write this, but the main thing is we are multiplying and understanding those two quantities. One represents the total amount of time worked, and one represents the amount we make per hour. Any questions? Okay, let's go look at the graph now. Okay, so if we look at, let's just all look at the table at the top of number 3 here, okay? Don't go off and graph yet. Let's look at this, because eventually this table is going to be completely blank and you're going to have to know how to fill it in, okay? So let's look at what the quantities are in here. The first column are our variables. And the variables are what we just talked about, the two things we multiplied, okay? Or sorry, the one thing we multiplied and the answer we got. So we have our time worked and our total earnings. Notice those came right from my table from number 1, time worked, total earnings, okay? Our lower bound for now is always 0, right? It's the least amount I can work. I can't work for negative hours, so 0 is my lower bound. Same thing for earnings. My upper bound, okay, we have 2 options here, but you can just put in what our highest amounts were. Then, who can tell us how we find intervals? I know they already did it for you, but who remembers how we find the intervals from last week? Upper bound divided by what?
Lower bound.
Good guess. I appreciate that. Divided by the number of grid lines. Remember, we divided by 20 last week because we counted that there were 20 grid lines on my chart. Let's just confirm that one more time here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yes. So think about that. 40 divided by 20 is 2. That's where they came up with that. 400 divided by 20 is 20. That's where they came up with that. Remember, if it doesn't come out evenly, we round up. So if it came out to be like 1.7, we round to 2. If it came out to be something like 3.8, maybe I'd go all the way to 5. Okay, we choose nice intervals. Now that we have those intervals and labels, let's start making our chart. So who can tell me what goes on this blank line on the very bottom of our graph? What label? What does the bottom of our graph represent, everybody?
Hours worked, right?
Hours worked, exactly. Because let's go back here, folks, to number 3, where it says time worked. That's my X variable. And total earnings is my what variable? Y, good. So remember, the X-axis is what is going on the bottom, left or right. So we just said our X is our time worked. Sorry, I'm moving so fast right there. So time worked. There we go. So time worked. And what is the unit of time we're talking about? Minutes, seconds, years.
Hours.
Hours. Good. Now my other axis represents the y-axis. So what should my label there be?
Total earnings.
Right. So it's money, but specifically they already gave us that label that says total earnings. Good. This is always so hard for me to write sideways on this tablet, so I apologize. Total earnings. And our total earnings is in what unit? Dollars. Good. Okay. So we're taking our labels right from our charts. Now we need to number our graph. So our bottom left corner is 0. And what are we counting by on our x-axis? What's the interval do they tell us?
20.
Careful. 2, right, on the x-axis, and that's why up above I labeled. Right?
Oh, I knew that.
Cool. So it says time worked, and there's that 2. So on the bottom, we're going to count by 2. So everybody go ahead, fill those in. And once you have that on the bottom, we're going to count going up and down. And what do we count by going up and down?
20.
There you go. So we have the 0 and then 20, 40, and keep on going. So everybody make sure you're doing this. And always double check and take your time that you don't skip an interval. So when you finish, double check because that could throw your graph off. Give everybody a minute to finish. Okay, so once you have that, we're actually going to plot our points, right? This is an empty graph right now, so we need to plot our points. Our 4 points come from our chart on the first page. Somebody tell me the first ordered pair we're going to plot. Tim. That's one of them. What will be the first one, just to stay organized? What's the top one? Yeah, we're just going to go in order so we don't miss one. So I'm going to first plot 4380. I'm going to put a little check there to remind myself I did it. So 4380 means we would go across to 40 on the hours and up to 380 on the money. And there I am near the top of the graph. Okay, everybody go ahead and plot the other 3 points. 438 and so forth. So keep on going. Okay, so let's just take a look. Always look at your points. All of the problems that we're doing for the next foreseeable future should make nice lines. If it's not a straight line, you plotted incorrectly or a calculation was wrong. We know the calculations were right this time because we did them together. So make sure that you're plotted correctly. So I'm just going to go through them one more time. So we plotted the first one together, then 438. We can go to 4, and then 38 is just below the 40. So notice I'm right below the 40. 876, we go over to the 8, and then 76 is just a little below the 80. And then lastly, we had 190. We go to the 20, and 190 is exactly in the middle between 180 and 200. Once we have our points, you're going to take a straight edge, right? We do not want squiggly lines. That's not going to help us when we estimate anything. So take your folder or a ruler, line all the dots up with that folder, and connect all the way through. Don't stop it too short. Make it go the entire length, okay? So you use a straight edge. I can't use that on the tablet, but we're going to do our best to make sure it's straight. Whoops. That didn't help. Okay. So notice I connected it all the way through. If you used a straight edge, your graph is going to look even better than mine. Okay? Any questions with making the graph? Okay, once you have that, I'm going to let you guys start to go off to do number 4 as I check in with people. So 4 says, next week you work 12 hours. Use your graph. So no calculations. Use your graph to approximate how much money you would earn for 12 hours. Then part B says use a complete sentence to explain. So go ahead and do number 4, A and B, and then we'll check that. All right. Can anybody share with me what you approximated for 12 hours, how much money you would make?
I can.
All right. Tell me.
I approximated that he would make around $114.
100. Okay, 114. Anyone have a different answer? Caitlin? 110. Anyone have a different answer? 115. All good answers, right? All of those are within 5 units of each other. And I like that because what do? We go over to the 12 hours and up to your line. Mine looks like about 112, which is and all of our lines are slightly different, right? Because of the way we connect them. And that is super close to what all of you guys said, right? 110, 114, 115. So all of those answers that the 3 of you guys shared are correct. Okay? So anything for your notes wise, I'm going to answer in a complete sentence. I would make approximately 100. And like I said, I'm saying 112 because of what my graph looks like. But if you wrote 115, leave it. That's super close. If you wrote 110, leave it. If you wrote 150, that is definitely off. If you wrote 70, that's definitely off. We want to be somewhere, I think, between the 110 to 115-ish. That sounds pretty good. Okay? All right, so how do we do that answer? We didn't use the calculator. We didn't multiply anything. What did we do? We used the graph, right? So we moved along the x-axis to the 12-hour mark and found where that coordinated with my line. Oopsies. My lighting just got super dark, but I think it should still work okay. Okay, so I moved along the x-axis, bless you, to the 12-hour mark and found where that was plotted on my graph. I noted the y value at that point, which for me was about 112. And folks, that description I just said doesn't have to be word for word. If you wrote yours with something similar, that's okay. The whole point is that we went along the x-axis, found where that meets my graph, then determined what that corresponding y value is. Okay? Did anybody write something that you want me to check? Like you want to leave it, so you want me to check it? Okay. All right. Number 5, write an algebraic expression that you can use to actually determine how much we'd make. So what would the expression be for this problem all the time? How do we determine how much money we make?
Multiply 9.5 by 12.
Okay, so you are on the right track. We're taking the $9.50, our hourly wage, and this time around specifically though, it's saying for any number of hours, not just specifically for the 12 hours.
Oh, variable.
Yeah, so $9.50
X.
times X, exactly. So we can leave it just like that. Now in number 6, what are they saying to do?
Okay, now I was right with
Right.
the 9.5 times 12.
Good. We're substituting in that 12 hours in for X. And let's hope, fingers crossed, we get something about like 112 like I had. Or
I got 114.
114. All right. So was my approximation pretty good?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And same for people who got 115. Great. For people who got 110, that's still really close. That's all good. Okay? So we get 114 here. So what does that mean in a complete sentence? I would earn $114 if I worked for 12 hours. And your sentences can be different, right? For 12 hours, you make $114. Any questions? Do we get the difference between using your graph versus actually doing the calculation out? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And last but not least, this is not in reference to the $950 or $950. Sorry, $9.50. This question is like a review question. In a complete sentence, explain the difference between an algebraic expression and an equation. So who remembers from last week, we did little check boxes of when something was an equation versus an expression. What's the difference between the two? Caitlin?
An expression, it equals something.
You're close. Good participating, because you're right on the right track. Anybody? She said something about equaling, and that's on the right track. But she just had it a little flip-flopped. An equation contains, oops, that's not how you spell contains. An equation contains, who can fill it in for me? An equal sign. But an expression does not. Both of them can have variables and operations, but the equation has the equal sign and the expression does not. So for example, (2x minus 3), that's just an expression. There's no equal sign. 2x minus 3 equals 7. That has an equal sign, so it's an equation. Okay, that's the difference between the two. So usually equations are just a little longer because we add in an equal sign and something that it equals. Any questions with any of this packet?